It's been an absolutely wild ride for the Giants and their fans this offseason, but when all is said and done, a lot has changed, including the departures of key from the past veterans like Evan Longoria and Brandon Belt officially with other teams. Carlos Correa officially with the Twins now. But specifically looking at first base with Belt going to the Blue Jays, what are the Giants going to do at that position? We'll get into the state of the roster there next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now until pitchers and catchers report, and then back to daily Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, a lot I want to get into, specifically looking at kind of the state of the roster and specifically the first base position, which, we've had a lot of new clarity with Brandon Belt officially signing with the Toronto Blue Jays. And so for the first time in forever, he doesn't figure to be the primary first baseman on this team. And so what does it look like at that position? I also want to get into today being the deadline for the team and players to exchange arbitration figures. And so it's a big day in that regard, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the first base position for the San Francisco Giants, Brandon Belt is not going to be that guy. He is officially a Toronto Blue Jay. Farhan Zaidi kind of met with the media and discussed Brandon Belt, discussed Carlos Correa being officially with the Twins. We talked about that on, I think, Tuesday on the show. But basically, what are the Giants going to do now? The plan is, according to Farhan Zaidi, and it seemed to be that way just kind of looking over the roster, is they've got some options there. Like LaMonte Wade Jr. is set to be the key kind of beneficiary of Belt leaving because, it's another way, kind of like moving Jock Peterson out of the outfield helps the outfield defense just by taking him out of the mix. And taking LaMonte Wade Jr. out of the outfield, I think, improves the outfield defense as well. So suddenly you're looking at Haniger and Conforto and Yastrzemski and Slater. Those are all players who should be able to at least give them like an average defensive outfield as opposed to being one of the worst, which is what they were by many accounts last year. But in the infield, you lose Evan Longoria, who was a good defensive third baseman. You now lose Brandon Belt, who was a good defensive first baseman, although both of those players kind of showing signs of regression even on defense as they got into their mid-30s. But it figures to be, LaMonte Wade Jr. is a platoon player. He, going into last year, he had played some in the majors, and he had never in his life in the majors had a hit against a left-handed pitcher. And so it is obviously a small sample of his career. It's not like he's been around a long time, but, he is a platoon player until proven otherwise, and he would have a lot of work to do to come out of that platoon. But the good news for the Giants is that at that position, they do have several options who are right-handed who could be the quote-unquote weak side of the platoon with J.D. Davis and with Wilmer Flores and then also David Villar. And David Villar, when we think about first base and not bringing back Belt and that it's going to LaMonte Wade Jr. and, like I said, Flores and J.D. Davis as other options there, what it does apparently, like what it seems to do, and Farhan Zaidi kind of backed this up, is that it opens up third base for David Villar. Because if you bring back Brandon Belt, then suddenly J.D. Davis and Wilmer Flores are also in the mix at third base. Not LaMonte Wade Jr., but still two solid veterans in Flores and Davis. And then it becomes harder to get a spot for David Villar. And so by clearing up first base for Wade and Davis and Flores, it opens up third base for David Villar. And so just to speak to Wade, though, momentarily, we kind of not forget, but it's easy to forget just how good he was in 2021. I mean, he had a 347 weighted on base average, a 116 weighted runs created plus. He hit 253 solid, 326 on base solid, 482 slugging. That's what really stands out. He hit 18 homers in just 381 plate appearances. So hit for a lot of power. Late night LaMonte was super, super clutch. But then last year, as good as 2021 was for Wade, 2022 was kind of that bad. He just definitely fell off. But if you look at kind of the underlying numbers and the expected numbers, they were better. And Farhan Zaidi has spoken to this. And so, look, he's not a super exciting player. And like I said, we're kind of talking about the upside of just being a platoon player. And I know people are tired of the platoons, but look, they platooned a ton in 2021. It worked out really well. They need some everyday guys, and they got some. Not Correa, not Judge, but Haniger is definitely an everyday type player. I believe that's what they're going to do with Conforto. Tyro Estrada, I think, is going to be more or less an everyday player. Crawford's going to be perhaps somewhat close to an everyday player. Behind the plate, I mean, Joey Bart, perhaps an everyday player. And so they've got some everyday guys. It's not the superstar talent, but look, having a few platoons on the field is just fine by me. And it leads to good production if they work. I mean, 2021 is a great example of that. They had some everyday guy types like Buster Posey and Crawford and others, but they also had their effective platoons, which included LaMonte Wade Jr. And so anyway, I'm okay with them giving that opportunity to Wade to start the year. And it is nice to have fallback options like JD Davis and Wilmer Flores, who don't necessarily need to be platooned. And so they're nice pinch hitting options because they can hit lefties or righties. And so they can kind of sub in and then stay in the game. And it's not going to hurt you down the road if they have to come up a second time. And maybe instead of a lefty on the mound, now there's a righty on the mound, but they can still hit them. And so I think the kind of starting alignment, look, I'm not seeing like a 95 win team when I look at the San Francisco Giants right now, but I am seeing a kind of, if you clear up that third base spot for VR, and I want to talk about him next, and how, I mean, he did so much in the minor leagues in 2022, and then he showed it in September as well, just kind of really breaking through and having a really good month of September, which is all you can ask for. And so he deserves that opportunity, and it could be a great thing. And so opening that spot for him, I think is a good thing. And we'll get into David Villar a little bit more in just a minute. And we're going to talk about this important deadline today with teams and players exchanging arbitration figures, perhaps reaching some one-year agreements. Giants have actually already done that with quite a few players today, and some other players left, like Logan Webb. And the resolution to that is going to be something really you're going to want to pay attention to. So we'll get into all of that in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro and college football to basketball, we've got it all at BetOnline, including MLB offseason stuff. Finally, the Carlos Correa saga is concluded with him officially a Twin. So, look, I know a lot of you probably didn't bet on that outcome, but it was fun, right? Paying attention to it throughout the offseason, and coming up soon, we figured to have over-unders on win totals. That's been fun to do the last couple of years as well. So daily action on all the sports that are in season, off-season action if we're in the off-season. You can check it all out at BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, as promised, I want to get into David Villar just a little bit. And also there's a mailbag question, like what is a opening day lineup going to look like? And we will get to that question now that there's a little more clarity, right, on who's going to be filling out some of these positions. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. And this is kind of prospect season too. We're going to be talking about top 100 prospects lists that are going to be coming out over the next handful of weeks here, and that's always really fun. I think people are sleeping on the Giants system a little bit. Some key guys had down years, but we're acting like their farm system stinks, but I don't think it does at all. In The Athletic, Melissa Lockard, I think, wrote a write-up on the Giants farm system, and I thought it was worth reading. There's some high-end talent still in the system and a lot of depth. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see when these rankings come out, top 100 lists, where certain guys land, like Kyle Harrison, who could be, easily a top 15 prospect in the game right now, and he's on the doorstep of the majors, essentially, and we're probably going to see him early in 2023, and I feel like people are sleeping on that. Anyway, David Villar, he's probably not going to find himself on he never did find himself on any top prospects lists, but he's a good example, perhaps. We'll see how his career ends up going, of how prospect kind of trying to guess who's going to be a good player in the majors is not easy. And a lot of times it's, guys just pop up out of nowhere and go on to be really good major league players. And so I don't put a ton of stock. Like Logan Webb was never a top prospect, and yet he has emerged as one of the better pitchers in the game in the last couple of years. And so a lot of it is a team's ability to develop guys and develop them at the major league level. Remember, Logan Webb was struggling in his first year plus in the major leagues, and then they believed in him the whole time. They kept saying, like, we just think he has more in the tank. We know he can be really good. And sure enough, they helped him get there. So anyway, that's the hope for David Villar, I would think, at this point. He just destroyed the competition in the minors in 2022. In my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people, it took them too long to give him a chance in the majors. That he was just tearing it up in AAA, and yet they were just continuing to run out guys who were, clearly struggling, like Tommy La Stella, etc. But when all was said and done, David Villar, he hit 275 in AAA, and that is by far the least impressive thing I'm about to say. 404 on base percentage, extremely healthy. 617 slugging. It's a 342 isolated power, which is just kind of eye-popping. Hit 27 home runs in just 84 games. 27 home runs in 84 games. And then he hit 9 homers in the majors. So 36 home runs in about 136 games. And so the power, he had a 224 isolated power in the major leagues last year. League average, I think last year was around 170. It fell off quite a bit from the previous year, so I'm forgetting exactly what league average is, but it was under 200 by quite a bit. And he's at 224, and so this is significantly above average power that he showed even in the majors, and way crazy power in the minors. And so we talk about the need to get younger and more athletic, right? Well, giving opportunities to guys like David Villar, who's turning 26 in looks like about 2 weeks here, about 2 weeks here, he turns 26. So he is young. He is, more athletic than some of their mid-30s guys like Brandon Belt. No offense to Brandon Belt. But, you see him hobbling around trying to take care of that knee. And you've got a young guy like Villar who's got nothing left to prove in the minors. And where the Giants are as a team, you got to be giving these guys opportunities. And so I have no problem with just paving the way to give David Villar that opportunity. And the thing is, they've got insurance plans. Like I said, at first, you've got insurance for LaMonte Wade Jr. in the form of Flores and J.D. Davis. But at third, you have that same insurance in the form of Flores and J.D. Davis. And then you've also got Casey Schmitt, who is arguably the Giants' best position player prospect. We just referenced Melissa Lockard's top Giants prospects list in The Athletic, and she had Casey Schmitt as it was Marco Luciano was the top position player prospect, but then Casey Schmitt. And Casey Schmitt made it to AAA, and Casey Schmidt's greatest attribute, perhaps, but like the most obvious attribute that isn't as much of a question as perhaps, hitting is tough in the major leagues. And so you always wonder, will he be able to hit in the major leagues? But defensively, if you can be a rock star defensive player in the minors, you're probably going to be a rock star defensive player in the majors. It translates better. It's easier to predict the translation is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, Schmitt is a excellent defensive third baseman. And so there's another layer of insurance if David Villar isn't able to be successful. And so I like the way that that's kind of shaping up. I like giving this opportunity to Villar, and I like that they have some options. It's not like sink or swim with David Villar, and if it doesn't work out, you're just stuck getting nothing out of that position. And VR can be optioned. And so if he really struggles, you can send him down and then mix in whoever else. And so, like I said, I'm not seeing, okay, yes, and therefore 95 wins are coming. I'm seeing kind of more of the same where we're talking like mid 80s, but the potential, if things go well, to be 90 something. And if things go poorly, perhaps you're a below 500 team. So that's kind of where they are. But in the median there, I'm kind of mid 80s or so, maybe 86 is where I'm landing. But look, baseball predictions are super, super hard. And nobody predicted 107 in 2021. You know, I think they underperformed expectations in 2022. And so that's why you play the games. So I want to answer this mailbag question coming from David, who says, given the current makeup of the Giants roster, what do you think a potential opening day lineup would be? So it helps to have some clarity over these various positions. But the way I'm going with it is they let off LaMonte Wade Jr. a lot. And something I want to be clear about is that I think we need to not think about lineups so much as like if LaMonte Wade Jr. is leading off, it's not that he's a leadoff hitter. It's they also think about like where they're going to pinch hit at various spots in the lineup. And so if Wade plus JD Davis or Wilmer Flores, that combination is getting the most plate appearances a game, then and they're going to be having the platoon advantage in pretty much all of their at-bats, I can see them doing that again. So I'm just going with Wade hitting leadoff because a big part of his game is kind of not chasing out of the strike zone, getting on base. Although I did just say his power was the biggest calling card. But you could put Wade there. You could put Conforto there. You could put, I don't know. I actually think Wade makes the most sense against a right-handed pitcher. And so opening day, it figures to be Garrett Cole in New York. And so I'm going LaMonte Wade Jr. at first base leading off. Then I've got Michael Conforto in left field. I do believe Conforto is going to play left, coming off the right shoulder injury. I don't think they want to put him in right field where throws are kind of more important. I think they want to maybe ease on his arm a little bit, and they'll have him in left, batting second. He's an on-base machine, so hitting at the top of the lineup makes a lot of sense. And then Mitch Haniger inserting a right-handed hitter between or after a couple lefties and before another lefty. I've got him hitting third in right field. He's an everyday player, doesn't have below average numbers against righties, so he's just kind of, for me, locked into the third spot-ish and going to play pretty much every day in right field there. And he's got a good arm as well. And then I've got Jock Peterson DHing, batting fourth. And then, hey, David Villar for me, batting fifth at third base. Yes, it's a risk. You could kind of flip-flop him. You could move Yastrzemski or Estrada up a little bit, but I want to split up the lefties again, and I've got VR. Just kind of see what you got there with VR hitting fifth. Although I'm not sure, maybe against a tough righty like Cole, maybe they give him a break and give that to JD Davis or to Wilmer Flores. Who knows? And then batting sixth, I've got Mike Yastrzemski in center field. The center field position figures to be a platoon of Yastrzemski and Slater at this moment in time. And when it's a lefty on the mound, Slater would probably hit near the top of the lineup, as he's often done. So you could flip even Yaz and Wade because, I don't know, Yastrzemski struggled quite a bit last year, but so did Wade. So yeah, you could flip these two. Have Yaz first and Wade, sixth, or vice versa. So batting seventh, I've got Thairo Estrada. This is pretty good length to your lineup. If Thairo Estrada, who was the Giants' best position player last year by many accounts, is hitting seventh for you. And for me, you want more everyday players. Let him be that everyday second baseman. I think some of the defensive numbers were kind of wonky for him last year, but he should be able to be fine. He's got good athleticism, and I just like him. Just let him continue to develop. He's also young. Like, he's 26 years old, I think. Going to turn 27, I think, in February. But let him be an everyday guy like he kind of was last year, and I think that's fine. Crawford batting eighth, playing shortstop, and then Joey Bart batting ninth at catcher. The catcher position is weird. The fact that it's just Bart and a guy who's a Rule 5 pick who has zero Major League experience, Blake Sable. I don't know. I think they've got to sign some catching depth to secure themselves in case that doesn't work out. And then you've got a bench of Wilmer Flores, JD Davis, Austin Slater, and Blake Sable, as I said. So Yeah, I think it's a solid group. It's kind of missing that upper tier talent, but you've got guys like Conforto and Haniger and Jock Peterson who have the potential to be pretty impact hitters if things go well for them. And hey, maybe a guy like David Villar as well. So coming up in just a minute, I want to turn our attention to this deadline for players and teams to exchange arbitration figures. We'll get into it in just a minute, but before we do, all right, as promised, the deadline is today. And so I was trying to wait until after the dust had settled on this. But as of this recording, the Giants have settled with a number of players, but there are still a few players left, including some of the more significant players like Logan Webb. Actually, I'm seeing some updates trickling in now. Looks like the Giants have avoided arbitration with every one of their arbitration eligible players except Logan Webb at this point. And so Webb is the one I was waiting for the most, and he's the one who has not been settled. And that's not surprising because we've heard reporting that the Giants were attempting to sign Logan Webb to an extension, and it's not at all a guarantee that that would happen today. But what does need to happen today is that basically it's called file and trial, which means today is the deadline to file. And if you end up filing, the team files a figure they think that should be your salary for the upcoming season, and the player files a figure they think should be their salary for the upcoming season. And if you don't reach a settlement before today's deadline, the team's policy, the Giants' new policy, it wasn't the policy under the old front office, it is the policy under this new front office, is that if you file these numbers, you're going to an arbitration hearing, which will take place in like a month. I forget exactly when, and then a panel of arbiters would pick one of those two figures. So as it is now, the Giants have avoided this entire process with, I don't know exactly how many, like 9. I'm just seeing the list here. It looks like about 9 guys. They've avoided that entire process by just settling on a number for their 2020. I think I'm saying 2022, 2023 salary. But for Webb, he's the one guy who's yet to be determined. And the MLB Trade Rumors estimate for what his eventual salary will be is about $4.8 million. And so there's 3 possible outcomes here for today with Webb. Either they file separate numbers. Giants would come in at like 4.6 and Webb would come in at like 5.3. And that would mean they're going to arbitration at some point in the next month. The other possibility is that they settle on a 1-year contract, which is what the Giants have done with all of their other arbitration eligible players. The third possibility is that they agree to an extension. There's no rule saying you can't agree to some extension. This kind of activity, like when you're discussing what should your salary be for the upcoming year, if you have an extension candidate like Webb, it can kind of spur those conversations that get you to agreeing to an extension. But the fact that it hasn't been settled yet, I mean, it was their most important and most significant case. And so it's not surprising to me that it's the one that has not been settled yet. But as of this recording, I don't really have any answers for you. I would hope that they avoid when you hear Webb filed for this, the Giants filed for this. That's the worst case scenario. It's not a huge deal if that happens, but what it does mean is you're going to arbitration during which the team is going to sit there and talk about why you shouldn't be paid what you think you should be paid as a player. They're going to tell you why you should make less than what the player is suggesting they should make. And that's just an ugly process all the way around. And that's why we call it avoiding arbitration when they settle on some figure before that process plays out. And so I hope that doesn't happen with Logan Webb. Doing that, especially with 3 years of arbitration remaining, including this year, wouldn't bode great for their chances of reaching an extension. So I would hope that they can work something out, but no guarantees. And plenty of good players do go to arbitration. I believe Aaron Judge went to arbitration last year with the New York Yankees. And, ultimately, when all is said and done, they got something done long term, even though they had kind of a contentious fight over his salary. Because when you set these salaries, it changes the trajectory of your future earnings. And so that's why teams can be kind of penny pinching with this, because it sets you up to earn more and more and more look, and that's what I'm saying. I don't like doing that with your kind of franchise pitcher. Just give him what he's worth and hopefully agree to an extension, but we'll see. So they agreed $2.8 million. They settled with Jacob Junis. $2.3 million. They settled with John Brebbia. J.D. Davis gets $4.21 million. Austin Slater, $3.2 million. Tyler Rogers, $1.675 million. LaMonte Wade gets $1.375 million. And Tyro Estrada gets $2.25 million. So it's more complicated than just like, you can't just look at the numbers, and not everyone is on the same playing field. It depends on where you are, how many arbitration years you've had in the past. Like Estrada is a first-year arbitration player, and he's one of these guys who actually gets 4 years of arbitration. And so 2.25 is a pretty healthy number for year one of 4 years of arbitration, because it's going to go up every year. And for like Jacob Junis, he gets more than Estrada. You might be like, is Junis really better than Estrada? Or Brebbia, he gets a little more than Estrada. But for Brebbia, he's in his final year of arbitration, whereas Estrada is in his first of 4. And so it's not a like apples to apples comparison when you're just cross comparing all of these players. So anyway, it's always a little bit of a complicated explanation, but that's just the way it is. All these players will be back, including Logan Webb, no matter what. It's just a matter of determining the salary and hopefully reaching an agreement on an extension. We can only hope. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance. And thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again next week. 3 episodes, like I said, until Pitchers and Catchers Report, which is about a month from now. 3 episodes a week. So have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.